When leaders step into new roles, most of them focus on proving themselves, and it's the exact opposite of what they should be doing. They step into a new role, maybe there's expanded scope, maybe there's a new team, maybe there's a new peer set, and people, of course, are watching. People are watching quietly, and assumptions are forming quickly. Trust, big word, trust is being built or is being eroded before you even realize it. And without trust, of course, everything falls apart. There's miscommunications and misunderstandings, and there's assumptions, and engagement suffers, and people start leaving. And of course, too much turnover kills organizations. The fastest way to build trust, which must be built, is not immediately proving yourself. They'll trust me if I prove myself. They'll trust me based on my competency. They'll see what I'm able to put output. They'll gauge my output and then they'll trust me. The fastest way to build trust is not by proving yourself and delivering fast. The fastest way to create trust is to create clarity and to do it early, to do it right away as a new leader in this particular position role. People do new leaders try to build their trust through their output. They say yes to everything because they want to create the right tone with everybody. So they say yes, they stay busy. I don't want to rock the boat right now. They avoid rocking the boat. Maybe they delay decisions until they get their feet under them and really gather more information. Which sounds wise, but ultimately it backfires because all that creates ambiguity for people, and people do not like ambiguity. The team then feels like, gosh, I'm not getting really led clearly, so I need to manage them. So they feel like they have to manage you. It signals uncertainty, not humility. There you are, keeping your head down and just pushing and doing the work so that you can prove yourself, and it's not actually what the team needs right now. Your silence, if you are too silent in new roles, silence is not neutral. It creates uncertainty for people. Trust actually starts as orientation, not emotion. People will think, oh, trust, there's an emotional component here. But what people actually want early on, not you necessarily proving yourself, what people want early on is to know what matters most to you. They want to know early on, how do you make decisions? They want to know early on, what do you expect from me? What does success look like here? And without answers, people fill in the blanks. Anxiety rises. Alignment goes away, and people feel unmoored. I worked with a newly promoted leader, someone who just grown into a new role, and this person spent their first 3 months saying yes to everyone because they wanted there to be this sense of goodwill. That was the intention. It was a great intention. The result was not goodwill. The result was confusion. And when people are confused, goodwill goes way down. When people are confused, they look for answers elsewhere, and they might get incorrect answers. When people are confused, they make up answers. And when they're making things up about you, they're never good. So this person's team certainly did not feel supported. And that was the intent, that goodwill and the support. They didn't feel supported. They felt like they were lost at sea. It's early experiences that really set the trust trajectory. We all know that that sense that we all have inside, and that we know from as the old adage says, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. First impressions, they become reference points for people. They become reference points for us. We've all had this experience of your first exposure to something or someone. It stays with you. It's tough to change it. People anchor in those early patterns, and inconsistency is going to create doubt. So trust doesn't you don't get a reset after 90 days. I mean, you might get a little one, but it's after that, those first 90 days are so important. And what happens in the first 90 days is that their trust in you is interpreted by everything that happened in those first 90 days. I'm not saying you can't go back and recover It's just harder. It's harder to recover trust, you know this humanly speaking, than it is to set the trust out front. There's something in the research literature called the primacy effect, that early experiences disproportionately shape long-term perception. First signals are weighted more heavily than later corrections. So people just don't wait for all the data. Nobody, I mean, we as a species, we jump to conclusions, we jump to assumptions. We don't wait for all the data. We are not that measured unless we've really, really practiced reserving judgment. People rush to judgment and they decide early and they update and revise slowly. So it really bears thinking about what you do in that first 90 days. It's really about predictability. The trust research on trust shows that people feel safer when behavior is consistent and when expectations are clear. Predictability reduces people's load, their cognitive load and their emotional load. They don't have to be thinking. Is it going to be okay? Does this person out? Are they out to get me? Do they doubt me? What am I supposed to be doing? What do they expect of me? And the emotional load is they don't feel like, they don't doubt you and feel like, should I be worried here? Does this person have my back here? There's both a cognitive and emotional aspect to that. And when people are overloaded, it comes back to bite you because you're the one who's overloading them. Clarity, on the other hand, feels like competence. Not only can they trust you, they can trust you. They feel like you know what you're doing just because of the clarity. Studies show that role clarity increases engagement, it increases performance. You're going to get better performance out of people, and it certainly increases that trust. Just role clarity, knowing what I'm supposed to be doing and knowing what you expect of me and knowing what you're doing, knowing what we're all doing. Leaders who clarify expectations early reduce anxiety. People like predictability. It is built into our brains, into our systems. So unclear leadership, when we're not clear, it creates stress for people, even when you have the best intentions. People aren't going to respond to your intentions. They're going to respond to their experience of you, which is based on your behavior. Most people believe if I'm new, I need to show my competence first, and once I prove myself, the trust will follow. And so they stay heads down and they, again, say yes. They don't set the boundaries right away because they maybe feel like they don't have the right to. I haven't earned the right to set boundaries right away. They delay naming their expectations. And it feels like this lovely humility. We hear so much about humility in leadership and servant leadership, which are really good things. But this is a appropriation. This is not the way that servant leadership and humble humility in leadership serves anybody. So it feels humble, it feels safe maybe, and it quietly erodes the trust. And what's fascinating is that this finding shows up again and again across leadership research in different studies, whether the studies were in labs, whether they were in real organizations. Researchers noticed the same pattern, that when people were introduced to a new leader and they didn't yet have performance data on that leader, they didn't wait to decide whether to trust them. I mean, there was no time for the performance data to come in. But they didn't wait. They didn't wait to decide if they were going to trust them. They looked for something else. So the research essentially showed that there were two types of leaders early in early interactions. One, leader A, is the prover, and they're focused on execution, and they stay flexible and agreeable because they're new and they want to set that nice tone. They avoided making strong positions early, and they let expectations emerge organically. Whereas leader B is the orienter. Leader A was the prover. Leader B is the orienter. They explicitly, right when they came in as a leader, they explicitly named priorities. They clarified expectations, and they clarified decision rights. Who makes the decisions? How are decisions made? What are people making decisions on? etc. They set early working norms. They, again, communicated how those decisions would be made even before results were delivered. And what so was so surprising, and many of the researchers were ultimately, some had set this up because they thought this was going to happen, but others were surprised in the finding that even before any performance data existed, leader B, the orienter, was trusted more quickly. It was trusted more deeply than leader A, the prover. Not because they were warmer, because they weren't. Not because they were more experienced. That had nothing to do with what the research showed, but because they made the environment feel predictable. It's so important for people to have this sense of security in a predictable environment. So people equate clarity with competence. That's what came out of that research. When someone names expectations, sets directions, explains how decisions will be made, the nervous system relaxes. Other people feel like, oh, I know the lay of the land here. I know the parameters here, so I can relax into those parameters. And when people feel less uncertainty, they label the source of that relief as, and of course it's you, as trustworthy and capable and leader-like, even if no results have happened yet. In new roles, I'll sum it up. In new roles, people don't trust you because you're impressive. They trust you because you're predictable. And predictability comes from clear priorities, named expectations, visible follow through, not from being busy, not from being agreeable. And that's why waiting to get your feet under you is going to work against you. Silence, it doesn't feel neutral to other people. It feels like uncertainty. So trust doesn't start as an emotional judgment. I just feel like I trust this person. It starts as a nervous system indicator. And clarity, you give them clarity, that's calming for people's nervous systems. So let's take this and let's talk about, all right, so specifically, you're already starting to get some ideas about what you could do early on. Well, let's formalize this. Orient the role. Don't just orient yourself, orient the role. You're going to name a strong leader, and that's you. You're going to name how you see your role. Like, here's how I see this role, and here's how I see your roles. They're going to name how they see the role. They're going to name what they're accountable for and what the other people are accountable for and what they'll prioritize first. Just put an appropriate label on things. So you say, here's how I'm thinking about this role and what I want us to focus on early. Very simple, very clear. You're also going to set clear working agreements early. And this is something that I'm very passionate about because people do not do this well. Leaders establish decision rights, they establish the communication norms, and they establish expectations around ownership and around escalation. What do you own? What needs to happen to trigger you to bring it to me, etc. So people really know what's expected of them. One leader that I worked with began every new partnership with a very simple conversation. Here's how I like to work. Here's what you can expect from me. And here's what I'll expect from you. And then that can become a conversation where it goes the other direction as well. We talk about what we both need to work effectively. We talk about these mutual expectations. And those relationships with that leader, specifically I'm mentioning, those relationships moved faster. I mean, that was not a leader that had friction in their relationships. And when you have less friction, you can move faster. This is a biggie. The reason I said this is so important to me is I classically see that leaders, and I'm going to bring this into your outside life as well. People, as human beings, we don't really set our expectations around communication norms, for example. We just mildly, vaguely assume that, well, we've all been communicating for years and years in our lives, so we all know how to communicate clearly. We all know how to communicate courteously. We all have the same definition of professionalism. We have these unspoken expectations, and then they come back to bite us. Have you ever been, ask yourself, have you ever been surprised because somebody didn't return your call within 24 hours? And you were taught, as I was early in my career, that professionalism demands at least within 24 hours, you at least send them something that says, I'm working on it. You at least update them. You at least let them know that you received their request and you are forwarding it to the right person, or you're working on it and you'll get back to them, etc. And so you judge them as unprofessional when that's not their expectations. They were maybe raised in an environment, came up in the organizational world in an environment where you get back to people when you have something to get back to them with. So when we don't establish the norms with clarity, then all sorts of things are going to go wrong. Think about in your personal life. Have you established the norms around chores, around communication, around schedules? Have you talked about that together so you get to set expectations together? This is a huge leadership piece. And if you don't have a formal leadership role, doesn't matter. This is something you want to start doing with anyone you work with or anyone you organize with outside of work, family, friends, etc. Be the one to spearhead this because it makes everything easier. And then, look, you're exercising your leadership. Another piece that you want to do is to make your follow through, speaking of follow through, visible. You know, in new roles, they're looking at you very closely. They're looking for your consistency. They're looking for your reliability. They're looking for closure. And signals really matter. Even really small signals matter. Just circling back, just naming progress, just closing loops is part of what we talked about, but it's just being sure that you are naming these things. A VP that I worked with made a habit of ending every meeting with, here's what I heard. Here's what I'm taking, and here's when you'll hear back from me. Here's what I heard, here's what I'm taking, here's when you'll hear back from me. And that one habit, that can change a career. That can accelerate trust more than any big win. That's predictability, that's clarity, that's going to build the trust. And of course, be sure to name and revisit your expectations. Don't just do it once. Trust is going to deepen when you revisit your alignment, when you adjust openly. Maybe you'd said something and now it needs to adjust. Don't just kind of assume and just don't kind of change the rules without talking about it. You got to name it. You got to explain those course correction. You know, trust is not built by being right. It's built by being clear, even when things change. People are pretty flexible with the change as long as as long as you're being clear about it. So when you build trust, when you build trust early, your team is going to settle faster. And if you're not the official leader, but you're exhibiting these leadership skills, people around you, people who work with you, they'll settle in faster. The decisions with people get to move more quickly. Resistance lowers, influence expands. It's an identity shift. You stop managing perception and you start leading with confidence. Yes, managing perception is important. We all need to think about what it is we're putting out there. But once you really make this commitment to these many different ways of being clear, you get to lead with more confidence. The fastest way to earn trust is not perfection. We're not talking about being perfect here. We're talking about being clear. Fastest way to earn trust is clarity, is consistency, is follow through. So think about it. In your current role, what assumptions might other people be making about you simply because you haven't named things yet? What could you be more clear about this week?